and welcome to the Airing Room, the space where we talk openly about housing, health, and the homes that we live in. Today, we're joined by Tom Deere, the founder of Ministry of Mould. Now, Tom has built a reputation for cutting through the noise around damp and mould and making the issues clear, educational, and easy to act on. We're going to be exploring why mould is more dangerous than many people realise, why it isn't just a winter problem, and what housing providers, landlords and residents need to know on how to create healthier homes. So Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Tamsin. Lovely to be here.
Fantastic. So firstly, before I kind of get into the questions, can you just share a little bit about your journey and how you entered into this field?
Yeah, I mean, I got into damp surveying about 10 years ago. I actually lost my job. I got made redundant from a renewable energy company, and I wanted something to do with surveying, and I just saw an advert for a damp surveyor, so got into it that way, and I've sort of carried on from there. Really started off, ran a big branch for a national company, and then about 4 years ago branched out on my own, and it's gone from there, really. Yeah,
that's a scary step to starting a business, but
yeah, it was COVID that did it.
And COVID did a lot for a lot of people.
Yeah, I had a lot of time to think, and I thought, I don't know if I want to go back to being employed. So there you go. Started a business in lockdown.
Yeah, so you know, you've surpassed the statistics with startups. You're in year 4, so you're obviously doing really, really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the big question is, why is mould in the home such a serious issue beyond it being something that's just unsightly?
Yeah, so mould is one of those things that's very much, you know, it's in the news, isn't it? And there has been deaths, as we know, sadly. But, you know, I'm very conscious of never panicking people, and I like to sort of stick with what the NHS would say on mould. I'm not a doctor, but I do know that what the NHS say is mould is bad for respiratory health. Particularly, it does worsen asthma symptoms, and it's particularly bad for the vulnerable. So children are very much at risk. I've got kids, and I certainly know that when they were little, they seemed to pick up every cold imaginable. Their little lungs just don't quite handle things as well as ours do. So that's an issue. And generally, I sort of think mould, I like to think of it a bit like hay fever. So I actually have hay fever, a very strange one. When it rains, my hay fever really gets bad, which doesn't happen to a lot of people. And mould is a bit like that. It's an allergen, which some people react very badly to. Some people react less to. So if you've got mould in your home, it can be very bad for you. For some, it's perhaps not as bad, but you just don't know. And so the advice is really don't have it. You know, it's not neat in the home. Get rid of it before it causes a problem.
That's a really interesting comparison. Like yourself, I'm a hay fever sufferer. I have to take antihistamines all year round.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one of those things. Unless you suffer from it, you don't know how difficult it is. But that's great. Just to think of it like a molecule of pollen.
Yeah, exactly. And that molecule can react to everyone differently. Everyone's an individual. So that's why, you know, actually, if you were to Google mould effects, it can be quite a confusing picture. And I think that's where it comes from, really, is that people react differently to it. You know, yeah, certainly it can be very bad, and it can be mild. But for most people, it's a known allergen, and it causes respiratory problems. So, yeah, as I say, get rid of it.
Get rid of it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as well as it being unsightly, we need to make sure that it is gone.
Yeah.
We've mentioned some of the health risks, and like you've said, for children and older people. But kind of many people kind of still think of damp and mould as being winter problems, or it's seasonal. So it's damp and mould season because it's colder. Why do you think there's that myth or narrative around it that damp and mould only exists from September onwards?
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of landlords, and the common trope is that it's condensation season, it's mould season has started. And that's so common that it's just sort of accepted as the rule. But actually, if you look at what makes mold grow, it's moisture in the air. And if you have a warm home, you can actually hold more moisture in your air. So you get this, and that's where we get into relative humidity and things that can get quite complex, and we probably won't talk about it now. But if you imagine in a warmer property, if you've already got mold growth, and then you've got a warmer air which can hold more water, you can actually have an acceleration in the mold growth. So you can actually experience worse mold during summer. It's totally possible, and completely often overlooked. It's not tackled during the summer. And I even have customers who say, I'll wait until winter to do things, and you think, well, why don't you tackle it now? Because it's going to happen.
Yeah, well, it's what we've kind of got this analogy at Damp Smart is we don't wait for it to be dark to change a light bulb. So why do we wait for it to be cold to start to act with damp and mold? Because obviously, I know you don't carry out the treatments at Ministry of Mould. You do the surveys and things like that. But surely it makes more sense if you're to go in and do a survey at any time of year rather than a pinch point, say, for a housing association or a property management company. You can have that steady workflow, but also the house has time to dry out before it gets cold or before,
Yeah, exactly. And, most mold problems, in my experience, are caused by ventilation or poor insulation or the way the airflow is moving in the house. And that's not going to change just because it's August. The fans are either working or they're not. And we can look at all of that through the summer months, certainly look at insulation, things like that, all year round and solve it before it comes along. So it's much better to prevent it. Much better and a lot cheaper, frankly, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. Prevention is better than cure. And as well, from a workflow capacity for, housing officers, estate agents, things like that, rather than just putting it onto a to-do list pile for spread your workload out, guys. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, and I'd love to have more work in August as well.
Yeah, exactly. We've got to change the narrative because it isn't, damp and mold is there all year round.
Sure.
Yeah. So what are the all year round causes that allow mold to thrive? So we've spoken about moisture and ventilation, but kind of what other things are there? Because I'll share a little example of my experience. So as I've shared with you before, I was a social housing tenant and we had damp and mold in our home. And initially we were told it was because we'd pushed a sofa too far up against a wall, moved the sofa. Then we were told it was because of our cooking habits and things like that. And then a fan was put in place. And I was really lucky, really good housing association that I was looked after by. Yeah. But the damp and mold was treated and removed, but we was sat on that sofa that had the mold spores still inside it. And you think every time we were sitting on it, it was agitating it. Are there other examples like similar to mine that you've ever experienced?
No, so certainly mold, like you say, in the sofa, that's one of those problems where if you're not getting rid of, if I take it back to what mold actually is, if you imagine, say you have a lemon, for example, with a small patch of mold on it, if that's got mold growing, that will release about 20 million spores an hour. It's incredible the amount of spores that will come off of it. Wow. From like a 1 centimeter square, and you can look this up. There's scientific studies on it. And so, if you've had a leak, for example, or you've got a leak behind a wall, the amount of mold that's coming off that is quite incredible. So that can happen all year round. And then if you've got the conditions are right, so as we talked about, there can actually be more moisture in the summer. You can be getting that mold growth. So that's why when people do remediation, it's so important to get rid of absolutely everything and get the house back to what we call the ecological baseline. So there's mold everywhere in the air, but you want to get your house at that level. You don't want this growth, because if you've got that hidden anywhere, it doesn't matter what month it is, you're gonna have problems, and you're gonna keep having the problems coming back.
So those tiny little spores, then you can't see them.
You can't see them, no.
So
I'm probably breathing them right now, to be honest. I mean, they are everywhere. Yeah,
they are everywhere. But if you've had a very visible damp and mold problem in your property, are there ways that you can test like the microparticles and stuff afterwards?
Yeah, so we do. We use a system called micrometer, which basically tests the total amount of mold in the air. And the numbers are staggering. If you do it in my house, for example, it might come up as a 10 or something. If you do it in a house with a little bit of a leak, it will be in the thousands. You know, it's the difference is huge if there is actually an ongoing growth problem. And that's the thing you need to tackle to stop it long term.
Yeah. And that ongoing monitoring, I suppose, as well, isn't it? Just to make sure that you kind of, you're checking in afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually, you know, I think people often clean off the mold and think they've tackled it. If you haven't got to that root cause, I'm afraid you haven't tackled it, really. You've just put a plaster on it. Yeah.
So I'm going to, a tangent question here that's popped into my head.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people say would use bleach to treat mold on a wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would bleach do to a mold spore?
Very little. Yeah. What bleach does is change the color. So that mold spore, which is typically black, the mold on the walls, it will bleach it literally, so you can't see it, but it doesn't kill it. It doesn't go into the roots. So a really easy thing people can do actually is you can just buy on Amazon hydrogen peroxide spray, which is exactly what you do your hair with.
Okay.
And that actually kills mold at the root.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't quite get rid of it visually as well. So you can do sort of a double approach. You can do the hydrogen peroxide, let it die, and then a day later you can bleach it if you want to get rid of the color. But you are mixing chemicals then, so be careful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm imagining a bottle of 90s Sun-In kind of being sprayed on.
yeah, don't use that.
No, this is it's that myth, isn't it? Or if you put a bit of bleach, a bit of water down some bleach, and it'll get rid of it, but it's not. You're just changing the colour of it as if you were to spray it.
Yeah, and actually one thing people often say to me is they're using a proper mold killer, because most of the branded ones, there's like HG is the big one and Silicang do one. If you actually look, they're sodium hypochlorite is what it's called. That is bleach. It doesn't say bleach, it says sodium hypochlorite. But people think because it says mold killer, that's good stuff, and I'm afraid it's not. It's just not.
And this is it. And that's the surface stuff that it's impacting. That's not the airborne stuff that it's having any impact on.
No impact on that at all. No.
Crazy. Okie dokie. So what's the biggest misconception you regularly come across about damp and mold?
So the main misconception is, I would say, the confusion between what is damp and what is mold. It's so common. You know, they are very different things actually technically. So when I talk about damp, what I'm thinking of is moisture moving through a wall, rainwater or water from the ground, and that brings salt with it. And when you've got salt on a wall, you don't get mold. So if you've actually got true damp, a structural damp problem, there's unlikely to be mold in that area.
Wow.
Yeah, and if you think about it, old foods, you know, salted foods, corned beef, you know, salted, because it doesn't grow mold. If you salt food, it doesn't get moldy. So,
isn't it? Almost.
Super. Yeah, really old-fashioned food preserving. So that's a really common thing. People think they've got a patch on their wall and it's mold. If it's got any kind of yellowing to it or fluffy white stuff like cotton wool, that is generally salt, and that's a damp problem.
Okay.
So if you do see that, say you're a tenant, more than likely that's your landlord needs to do something to the fabric of the building. So that's such a common misconception. And then mold is generally, what you're talking about is airflow and air exchange not being enough, and then you get that black mold, which is different. Yeah. So I see that a lot, and I do a lot of surveys where, you know, tenants will show me around and they will point at the mold and say, this is where the damp's coming in, this is the damp's coming in around the window, damp's coming in here. And it's, you know, have to break it to them. It's not damp, it's different.
Yeah. But I suppose because the words are used together constantly.
Yeah.
They're not
anymore. I talk about damp and mold all the time, but yeah, they are sort of interchangeable. But if you really think about it, they are a different thing, and it's useful to understand the difference because it guides how you're going to tackle the problem. Yeah.
Fantastic. Really, really good. So at the Ministry of Mould, and it's the same at Damp Smart, there's a big focus on education. Why is making the findings easy to understand so important for residents and landlords?
Yeah, I think education is probably the biggest thing in a way. And I know we're going to come on to sort of legislation and things, but I think there's this real disconnect between, okay, so I'll give you an example. This morning, I actually did a survey on a property where it's social housing. The lady's looking to buy the property, right to buy. And she's been concerned for years, 7 years, it turns out, of there's mold in her kitchen and in her bedrooms. She's been saying to the social housing it's because the chimney's got a leak. So, and what's happened is social housing, they've been round and they've looked at the chimney and they've said it has a bit of a problem, but it's not major. But at no point has there been the education for those people who have been going round to simply say, well, what are you concerned about? And if they had, and she'd said it's the mold in my kitchen, it's pretty clear with a bit of education, you know, those two things aren't linked. And I just think there's a massive gap there. So she's been 7 years worrying about her asthma. She's an older lady with asthma. And you think, God, a bit of training and knowledge, and they could have got to the root of that problem a long time ago.
Yeah.
And
so
really,
So I did an interview with a private landlord called Dawn, and she's only got a small portfolio of her property, but one thing that she spoke about was, you know, landlords actually understanding the homes that they own, and when they've got a tenant in situ to do that piece of work. Because if you're living in a new build compared to living in a 1970s or a 1990s house, those three have very different needs.
Very different, yeah.
Totally. Even the same from, I suppose, it's attached to living in a masonette to living in flats and things like that.
Yeah, there's a huge thing about that, and you know, and even you can change the use, the way your property behaves quite easily. You know, another really common thing I hear from people is, oh, we never used to have a mold problem, and then you look around and think, oh, they new windows. Oh yeah, and we got the mold. They were in 2 years ago. We've had the mold problem since then. And you think, you know, that simple thing, that window installers, great windows. They don't let any air flow through at all. Which is great, but it's not, is it? It's actually, there's a problem there.
Yeah, well, houses are suffocating, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, completely.
I think we spoke about it prior, didn't we? The foam insulation in a loft.
Yeah.
You know, like they're literally sealing a roof shut, and it's like
completely. Yeah, and what happens is the timbers rot. Yeah, and everything rots, and you get water dripping down the walls, down the roof, down the slope, because it's just drowning in there. Yeah. And
I think I said to you as well, the house I did a HMO down in Newquay, and literally they boxed in at the most beautiful cornicing, like Victorian cornicing, to turn it into a HMO, and it literally turned it into a plastic box for somebody to live in. And you just think, wow, and you're concerned that you've got a damp and mold problem.
Yeah, you've literally created one.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of issues with that, isn't there? You know, the external wall insulation people put on now, although it's good, if it's not done correctly, you've just sealed a house. You've completely sealed it up, and there's going to be problems there.
There's ventilation. Ventilation is really...
Yeah, exactly.
So we mentioned legislation, and obviously you've mentioned that there's been loss of life. Obviously, very tragically, we have AWAB's law coming into place at the end of October 2025 due to the death of a very young child. So AWAB's law is putting mould very firmly on the national agenda, as it should. Do you think landlords, housing providers are prepared to tackle this as a year-round issue?
I think they're going to struggle. And the reason being, I really think the whole ethos really is very much reactive with social housing at present. And probably with private landlords as well. You know, that's the idea of preventative maintenance is not particularly in their vocabulary, if you like. And that's something that's going to need to change to really tackle these problems. Because the danger is, if they just keep treating it as a reactionary thing, they're always going to be on the back foot. And rather than changing a fan when, you know, at a routine inspection, they're going to wait until there's mold everywhere, then change the fan, then pay out more money to clean the mold. Meanwhile, they're going to be getting fined now, or potentially taken to court. Who knows? We'll see what happens in terms of prosecutions. But yeah, it's going to be a big culture change for them, I think, for sure. They're going to have to get some processes in place.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the timeframes, I think, you know, I really feel for housing officers massively at the moment. Like I said, I've worked in housing, and I've got a lot of former colleagues that, you know, I know will be feeling really panicked right now. So it's about finding solutions that will support and help them to make sure that they feel that they're doing the right thing. And I think this is, you know, like with the airing room and having these conversations, this is what it's about. This isn't about picking anybody apart or anything. We just need to start having real and honest conversations so people know what to do and who they can turn to.
Yeah, I mean, I've known housing officers over the years who, you know, they're expected to do 10 surveys a day on properties, you know, and can you really do 10 decent surveys a day? I don't think so. You know, they're really overworked, and they're going to struggle to take a proper view because, you know, just walking into a home and explaining why the mold is happening is sometimes not easy. It takes a little while, and you can't do it in 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, but even the in-house surveyors, you know, within HAs, they haven't got the capacity to deal with they've got with disrepair claims as it is, let alone with AWAB's law starting to come into effect. So it is, you know, I do really feel for these guys. So it's important that, these conversations are happening and they're here to help and support you in understanding what this is about. Because, I mean, how many surveys would you say you'd like you would carry out in a day feeling comfortable that you've been detailed?
2.
Yeah.
3 at a push, but I'd need time the next day to compile the reports, you know. I think that the issue they have is they're expected to do 10 a day and then 10 the next day and 10 the next day. And there's no time to really think about that, is there, and write reports.
Well, you get confused, surely, going from one house to another to another.
Yeah. I mean, I had one, and it actually, it's ended up going to court with the tenant, but the poor surveyor from the housing association turned up, and he did absolutely nothing. He had very little time. He just looked around, and he later said he didn't even have his damp meter with him that day. He'd forgotten it. You know, and I'm not actually blaming him at all. I just think he's so under pressure, so racing around. I just think it's going to lead to problems at the end of the day.
Well, and we're all human, aren't we? So the more stress we're under, like that lemonade bottle, you're just being shaken up and shaken up. You know, you never know, that guy might have had a family, the kid might have kicked off, didn't want to go in the one's beans on toast or something, and that was the reason why the damp meter wasn't picked up, because we're human.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so as well, kind of like with legislation then, so we've got AWAB's law. What do you see being the biggest gaps between legislation and what's actually happening in people's homes?
I think there's a big gap in terms of, there is the education, there's also the understanding from all sides, to be honest. You know, in terms of the legislation, if you really think about it, it's very top down, isn't it? It's all on the housing association to do everything. And there's no real requirement for them to educate their tenants. Like you've just said, if you have a 1950s property, a 1930s property, a 1990s property, they do need to be run differently.
Yeah.
So, and I think there's a gap there for like a manual. I feel like every time someone moves into a home, they almost need to be given a booklet or something, or a talk to explain, look, this property, it doesn't breathe for this reason, it's got cavity wall insulation, etc. You need to open windows, or this is how it's going to run, you know?
Yeah. Do you know, as you were saying that then, Tom, I don't
Mm.
know if you ever go and stay like in an Airbnb, other obviously holiday cottages are available.
Yeah.
But what do you get when you go to an Airbnb? You get a welcome pack, don't you? But not a general welcome pack for that property.
Yeah, exactly. You get it, don't you? You get all that information.
Yeah, and I get it. If you're managing 30,000 homes, you must be thinking, geez, you're not going to have to write that 30,000 times every year, are you? Like,
no, I think you could probably break it down by construction type, couldn't you?
Yeah.
It's this type of home, so you need to do this. This is the way it works.
We could have come up with a new business now, Tom. This is it. It's going to be Ministry of Mould and Damp Smart, how to ventilate your home guides.
Yeah, well, I'll talk to you later. Yeah. I'm sure that someone needs to do that somewhere.
Yeah, no, it does. It's that piece, but you know, I mean, the data's out there, isn't it? You know, so it's just about compiling it, but in a way that's really easy to understand for people, you know. I was a housing association tenant manager, that's at 2010, so 15 years ago. So it was very different. I knew my housing officer really well.
Mm-hmm.
Like they used to do the local kind of estate walks. They'd be telling you off if your garden was a mess, and you know, all of this stuff. But 15 years on, it's a very different landscape, and they're still tackling a lot of, you know, HAs are still tackling the backlog from COVID, and what we're 5 years on from that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, there's not there's people on the ground, is there?
No, and it changed the way that people work as well. You know, some for the better, maybe some not so much so, but I mean, obviously you've seen our solution at Damp Smart. How do you see solutions like Damp Smart helping in this field? Like thinking about like the education piece and like what we've been kind of chatting about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Damp Smart system, I think, is very smart in that what can happen when Ministry of Mould, when we go and do surveys, is we don't see the true picture of how the house is lived in. And that, unfortunately, can be people thinking, oh, we've got a surveyor coming, we need to open the windows more, we need to do this, we need to turn on all the fans and things. And whilst I get there trying to do the right thing and show that they're doing the right thing, actually it means that the information we get on the survey is not actually reflective of what's going on in the property. So your system's very clever in that we leave it there for 2 weeks, and hopefully after a couple of days people have forgotten to falsely open the windows and they go back to doing what they normally do. And then you can start to really see, can't you? The fans actually, they are using the fans, but they're not man enough for the job. They're not hacking it. Or, you know, the window's open, but when the window's open, it drops the temperature so much that you get mold. Or, you know, you can get all that data then, can't you? So that's a dead useful system, to be honest. And I think it will certainly help a lot of people.
We hope so. We really hope so. Like you say, like Leonard is the brains behind this. You know, he's spent a really long time looking at the data side of it, and I think it's just that you can't argue with data, can you, if it's presented to you in a certain way. And he showed you the granular detail that he's gone to on that app.
He's holding back a lot of the data. There's so much, isn't there?
I know. Well, this is it, but not everybody wants that amount of data. Some people just want, oh, no, right, you need to open that window, you need to do this, and that's all they want. Whereas you get other people like you would look at that report differently to how I look at the reports, you know, because it's in your professional opinion. So for me, I'd be like, oh, That's a nice graph. Whereas you, oh wow, look at the relative humidity that we've got here, and
yeah.
you know, everyone's different. Right. So we're nearly at the end of our interview today, and we're going to finish with the question that I like to close on. Is, if you could have a real and open conversation with anyone, you don't have to name names, but you can name names if you want, or any professional, who would it be and why?
Yeah, so I thought about this, and it would have to be the housing ombudsman, the head honcho, which is a guy called Richard Blakely or Blakeway, forget exactly. But what I'd like to talk to him about specifically is the housing ombudsman put out a really influential report back in 2021, which was called, I forget the name, but the subtitle was "It's Not Lifestyle," and it was about damp and mold. And that was them saying, the point of the report was they were saying you can't just blame tenants for mold problems, which is great on the face of it. But what I've actually noticed in my experience is it's like another trope that letting agents use. Oh, we're not allowed to say it's not lifestyle anymore. We're not allowed. It's like they've taken that one little headline and used it to make all sorts of crazy decisions, you know, because what I'd like to talk to him about is the fact that does he really think that's a good phrase? Because as you know from your data, sometimes there is a little bit of lifestyle involved.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are problems, and it's a bit more nuanced than maybe they are, or they tried to tell everyone it was, you know. I think just that little phrase sort of has scared some agents. They're like, oh, we're not allowed to tell them to open windows or use fans anymore. It's not the housing ombudsman said. You're like, you are, you know, and you certainly should be explaining to people how to manage the humidity in their property. It's useful. Yeah, so I'd love to chat to him about that.
Oh, fantastic. Well, if you're available, Richard, you know, get in contact and we will set up this conversation, because we want to keep these conversations happening. And this is what this is about with Damp Smart. We want to create a space where we can be raw and open about housing and health, because not one person has the answer or solution for this.
No, sadly not.
Sadly not.
It's a bit more nuanced than that, isn't it? It's tricky.
It's tricky, but we need just to keep having these conversations and getting it out there and just forming some sort of network of positive disruption in this space. So rather than it just being another argument or debate at the House of Commons, we're having positive conversations that help and support in any way. You know, if somebody's watching this today and they're like, oh, who's Ministry of Mould? We've Googled them. Brilliant. Okay. Oh, who's Damp Smart? What's this? You know, and just little things. If you can take away from how long have we been talking? 20, 30 minutes? And you can take away one tiny little piece of information from this conversation that's going to benefit you. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
Tom, thank you so much for being with us today. Like I say, this is what the Airing Room and Damp Smart are all about. We want to turn evidence into action, and we want to help create healthier, safer homes, the same as Tom and his team at the Ministry of Mould. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you to Tom for being with me today. So make sure you join us next time when we will be airing out more of the big conversations in housing. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tamsin. It's been great.